Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Got a story sent to me by a whole bunch of people. Mom handcuffed and jailed for letting her 14-year-old babysit kids during COVID-19. The mother says, I almost don't have words for how low it made me feel. The story's from Reason.com. Lenore Skenazy wrote this version of it, but I saw it everywhere. Type in babysitter mother arrested, and you'll get this story. COVID-19 shut down the daycare that the mother normally used, but she had to go to work, and her 14-year-old daughter was at home doing remote learning. So she asked her daughter to watch the kids, and there were 4 siblings that she was watching. While she was engaged in remote learning for about 10 or 15 minutes, perhaps, she didn't catch the fact that a 4-year-old little brother had wandered out of the house. Now, when she realized he was missing, she realized he's most likely at his friend's house, which is right there. Literally, it's there are photographs of some of the stories showing how close these houses are together. So she goes over to get her 4-year-old brother, and the friend's mom had called the police. So now the mother, who's a single mom in Blairsville, Georgia, is facing criminal reckless conduct charges for letting her 14-year-old babysit her siblings. The charges carry a maximum penalty of a year in prison and a fine of $1,000. Now, the arresting officer wrote in his report that anything terrible could have happened to the kid. He could have been kidnapped. He could have been run over, and he could have been bitten by a venomous snake. Why does he stop there? If pterodactyls were still alive, he could have been snatched by a pterodactyl. He could have been grabbed by foreign agents and held for ransom. He could have been kidnapped by mole people, if they existed. I mean, there's all kinds of things that could have happened. The problem is that the Venn diagram of what actually did happen shows that those two circles never actually intersect. So when the mother protested the kid was only gone a few minutes, the officer responded a few minutes was all the time a venomous snake needed. This guy's got a hang up on venomous snakes. So the arresting officer's name is Deputy Sheriff Mark Pilot. And apparently, like I said, he's really into them reptiles, especially the poisonous ones, because they're out there to get the kids. By the way, what about a boa constrictor? Do we overlook the fact that there are deadly snakes out there that actually use other methods beyond poison? Are we now ignoring the threat of boa constrictors? The case has been dragging on for almost 2 years now, while the mother's lawyer argues that charging a mom for a normal parenting decision was declared unconstitutional by the Georgia Supreme Court. And it's funny because in that case, a mom left her 11-year-old babysitting a younger sibling who did die in a tragic accident. Even then, the court ruled it was arbitrary and subjective to try to second-guess the mom's decisions. What's more, Georgia's own child protective guidelines say that kids can babysit at age 13. Age 13. So this is a 14-year-old. And now I understand times are different. And I risk being the old man shaking fist at clouds. I never babysat anyone. I was the youngest brother in my family. I've got all brothers, and I'm the youngest of all of us. So they babysat me. I never babysat them. I was also never asked to babysit kids in the neighborhood, but I know people who were younger than 14 who were asked to babysit. That was not that crazy of an idea back then. So meanwhile, the attorney who's handling this is with an organization that fights cases like this because they pop up fairly often. So he has now filed a motion to dismiss the case. And meanwhile, the mother has been investigated by the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services. And they say that there's a problem with this kid wandering outside. But she was no longer under DFCS supervision when the second incident occurred. DFCS investigated the conduct and found it unexceptional, and they closed the case. So they looked at it and said, and they walked away from it. But the police officer said, well, there's poisonous snakes out there. Don't mind the constrictors, but the poisonous snakes, you got to watch out for them. The police officer, though, recalled the earlier investigation and believed that this shows some sort of pattern, a pattern. 2 things have happened. It's a pattern. He initiated the arrest about 2 weeks later. And meanwhile, the mother says that when the police came to her house, there were 5 of them. 5 police officers. to handcuff and arrest the mother. She says, I almost don't have words for how low it made me feel. To truly feel in the bottom of my heart that if I'm anything, it's a good mother. Everything you do is for your kids, to be stripped of that to the point where you are handcuffed in front of them. They then dragged her out, put her in a police car, and took her to the county jail, where she was, of course, mugshotted, fingerprinted, and then put on a pair of bright orange Crocs. Bright orange Crocs. Then she was put in a cell. I remember curling up in a ball in the corner just wanting to hide, she says. And then her ex-husband came and bailed her out. Now, the district attorney in the case said he felt the cops acted prudently as the boy had been outside once before, and he added that a guilty verdict would most likely not result in prison time for the mother, but thought that forbidding her from letting her daughter babysit might be a good idea. We just want to make sure the children in our small community stay safe. So yes, some of you are already doing the math going, wait, if she were to spend a year in jail, who's going to watch the kids? Can't be the 14-year-old. That's a problem. Meanwhile, the prosecutor said he believed the boy was wandering naked in a thunderstorm. And in fact, the boy was wearing clothing and there was no storm. So you've got a bunch of people with imaginations down there in Georgia, because the one cop says that poisonous snakes don't take that much time, but the kid also could have been run over or kidnapped or bitten by a venomous snake. And by the way, all three of those could happen to him. He could get run over after being kidnapped and then be bitten by a poisonous snake. So let's not downplay that. But meanwhile, the prosecutor says, well, he's wandering naked in a thunderstorm. And so I'm more concerned about this prosecutor who reads a police report and somehow finds in it the concept that the little boy is naked in a thunderstorm. That's weird. Prosecutor added the officers informed him that the 14-year-old had some measure of learning disability, making her an unreliable sitter. Meanwhile, the mother says that the daughter was diagnosed with ADHD, but she has a GPA of 4.45. 4.45. Some measure of learning disability. I don't know what that learning disability is, but if it gives a kid a 4.45, assuming it's a 4-point scale, more kids should have that disability. She's vice president of the 4-H club. She broke school records in varsity track. She completed the Red Cross Child Care program and is certified in CPR. But the prosecutor thinks that she might not be a good babysitter. Nonetheless, it shouldn't be necessary to have a superstar teen before a parent can make hasty child care arrangements during the pandemic. That's why the organization Let Grow is working to narrow states' neglect laws, ensuring that they kick in only when parents put their kids in likely and obvious danger, not when they make a decision a cop or caseworker disapproves of. As for the incident itself, 4 is definitely quite young. The boy's parents would be well advised to remind him not to go outside and possibly make the doors something that can be locked so that a child that small can't unlock them. But a kid wandering off to play with a neighbor used to be considered childhood, not child abuse. There is a GoFundMe for the Hendersons on GoFundMe, and it's a crazy story. So again, in a nutshell, the mother has got to go to work. 14-year-old is doing remote learning, and the mom says, can you watch the kids while I go to work? And the 4-year-old kid gets out, and the older sister figures it out very quickly, 10 minutes, goes and finds a kid and was going to bring him back home, except that the other parent called the police. And a little while later, the police show up and arrest her because he could have been kidnapped, he could have been hit by a car, and he could have been bitten by a venomous snake, because that's how they do that. The venomous snakes are real quick, real sneaky. We're not so sure about the constrictors, but the venomous snakes we're pretty certain about. And then, of course, the prosecutor goes, and by the way, the kid's naked in a thunderstorm. So there's that. No, there's not that. You guys can't just make stuff up. I wonder if he'd say that in court, or if by the time he got to court, if he'd get his facts straight. And it's kind of sad because, these news organizations are interviewing all these people, getting all these statements, and for him to make a statement that's that far off doesn't make him look that good. So there you go. So there's a crazy story. Craig, Scott, Keith, Brad, and Elva all sent it. Reason.com published it. They do wonderful work there. Lenore Skenazy wrote it. Mom handcuffed and jailed for letting 14-year-old babysit kids during COVID-19. Questions or comments? Put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Happiness is not a horse. You cannot harness it.